Okay. Let's spend 2 minutes overall on what is performance management and then go on to performance appraisal and its role in performance management. What is performance management? Basically, a systematic and data-oriented approach to managing people, which relies on positive reinforcement as a major way to maximize performance. Okay, so it's a systematic process, to the extent possible, data-oriented approach, and that relies on positive reinforcement as a major way to maximize performance. Let's pause for a moment and see what are the factors that drive performance. Starting from, well, on the diagram, the very first one, knowledge and skills, very apparent. If I have enough skills and knowledge, it will impact on performance. Talent and fit, am I fitted for the job? Yes. If I'm an introvert, then obviously if I'm in a external facing job like marketing, I may not be the right person. So the talent and fit is important for performance. The environment again is very important. I know people who have done very well in one organization, but in a similar job in another organization, they have not done well. So the organization culture, the work environment, that plays an important role in driving performance. The tools and resources available with the employee, is he adequately equipped? Does he have the resources to perform his task? The systems and processes, clear expectations and accountability. Do I as an employee know clearly what is expected of me, or is it vague? Do I know what I'm accountable for, or again is that left vague or left for me to find out? Very often when the boss and subordinate meet at the end of a review period, maybe 6 months or 1 year, if there is lack of clarity on expectations, you find that both of them are talking two different languages. Motivation here I mean reward, recognition, growth, whatever is extrinsic motivation for an individual to give of his best. These are some of the factors which impact on performance. Now, where does performance appraisal come into this? This is part of the overall performance management process and impacts on various factors which I have given here, but anyway this slides will be available later on, so I'm not going to go through this. All I want to say is that performance appraisal is part of the overall performance management process and impacts on a number of aspects, whether it is career planning, whether it is coaching, development of employees, rewards, recognition, performance, etc. If I were asked to define performance appraisal, and I'll use the layman's term, basically what are we saying? We are looking at assessing the worth of an individual or the value of an individual primarily by his or her contribution to the company. Secondly, evaluating, assessing the employee's performance relative to what is expected of him or her. I think that is essentially the meaning of appraisal, that I appraise somebody in line with what is expected of the person, and in the process, I try and assess the worth of the individual to the organization. Now, why do companies have performance appraisal? And I'm asking you this because I found that whenever there are employee engagement studies, employee satisfaction surveys, the one area which gets the most negative marks is the performance appraisal process in a company. Whether it is a top level company or an average company, this is the key area of discomfort. And yet all companies have a performance appraisal process. So why do companies do this? Why don't companies abolish this process? Firstly, you need to measure performance against some objectives or set standards. At the end of the year, if you have to reward people or to grow them or to develop them, this becomes a vital input. Secondly, to plan continuous improvement, you call it a performance improvement plan, so that if today I have achieved something, next year, what more can I achieve? Can boss and I work together so that I can increase my achievement next year. Thirdly, to identify training and development needs. What are the training inputs an individual needs? If there are gaps in performance, that helps us identify those needs better. Fourthly, to take a decision on remuneration based on performance. What sort of increment should I give? Should I give him more than somebody else or less than somebody else? So remuneration is a part of the motivation process. Then some agreement on the coming years or coming periods, expectations, and how am I going to measure the expectations so that there is clarity on both parties. To get some inputs for career planning, whether it is a job rotation, whether it is promotion, whether in a final case outplacement. This gives me reliable inputs for that. To give an employee feedback on performance and thereby enable him or her to know where she stands. I'll give you a simple example. In Ashok Leyland, when first time we did a VRS scheme for executives, we had identified some 300 executives for the VRS based on our assessment of their contribution, performance, etc. To our surprise, when we called them, and I would say squarely it was our fault, and we told them that listen, this is this, and they would have to go, and we would give them some reasonably good package. All of them came back and said, oh, virtually all of them, sir, how can you say this? The performance has been rated as good so many years. I got these letters from the boss. Now suddenly you are telling me at the age of 48 that I'm sort of not contributing. That I think was a failure of adequate feedback to the individual. That's a lesson we learned, and I think it's important that a person knows, because I find very often that individuals think they are doing a great job when the company thinks that they're doing a very mediocre job. So unless there is this regular feedback, otherwise the employee slips into complacency and the bosses feel he's not performing or she is not performing. This also gives an opportunity for employees to raise and to discuss their job-related issues with the boss. In a day-to-day busy interaction, that becomes very difficult. So this is an opportunity for the employee and the boss to sit and discuss job-related issues. And of course, finally aligning individual goals, departmental goals, and corporate goals so that the entire organization is in alignment and is on the same page. I think these are some of the objectives of a performance appraisal system, which is why whether it is done well or done badly, virtually all companies have some sort of a performance appraisal process. I will now hand over to my colleague, Professor Sridhar Natarajan, to go ahead. In between, I may interject as necessary. So over to you, Sri.
Okay. Good afternoon, friends. This is Professor Sridhar Natarajan, Dean of Chennai Business School. So the next thing is, what are the steps? What are the steps in the appraisal process? As you can see, there are three critical steps. The first step is setting of the goals and the KRA. That's the first step. Second one is to appraise the performance. Third is to give feedback. Now, in the first step, goal and KRA setting, normally you do it with the appraisee. That means the employee and his superior, they sit together and agree on the goals and the KRA. KRA stands for key result areas. So they agree that for the period, normally it's 1 year. The reason why it is done together is, otherwise it's quite possible the superior gives very unachievable goals, and the employee, instead of getting motivated and charged, he actually feels defeated. So the first step is to set it jointly with the appraisee. Now, if you set a goal and a KRA and then wait for 1 year to do the appraisal, as Mr. Amrulya said earlier, there may be a lot of gaps in the expectations, gaps in the clarity. So you must continuously review that is the KRA well understood, is the employee able to cope with this kind of a challenge, is there something that I can do to help the employee achieve his goals. That is why a continuous review is done. this could be a quarterly, half yearly, is largely dependent on the organization, how big the organization is and how much time the superiors have to devote to this kind of thing. In my opinion, a quarterly review is adequate because it gives time for a course correction, and in extreme cases it may result in some kind of an adjustment of a KRA also. Normally the KRA adjustment is not that important. It is the midterm course correction in the achievement of KRA that is what is the focus when you do the review. Once the performance appraisal happens, that's at the end of the process is over and now want to know what really happened. If you just assess the relative worth and the value and do not give feedback, then the appraisal is not really complete. So you assess the performance, you let him know or let her know what has happened, and then you decide, given the fact that this is your performance, let me give you feedback on what we can do next. One feedback obviously is, if an appraisal is used for decisions on increments or compensation and reward, then you must communicate the decision on that particular aspect. Not only that, if as a result of the appraisal, the feedback is that you need to enrich your job either through rotation, or if you are ready to take up challenges in the next level, then the points about promotion and job rotation can also be discussed. And normally when you give the feedback and you also tell the employee where he stands, it is good to also kind of prepare the setting for the next years. What could be the goals, what could be the KRAs, and what could be the decision that we take, the direction that we take in the coming year. Now, we have already told you that appraisal is very critical. Therefore, I think you must all have a good idea as to what is a good appraisal process and therefore what is not a good appraisal process. In order for the appraisal process to be good, there has to be a lot of clarity on the expectations of employee. This responsibility of making the clarity there is largely on the manager, on the supervisor, not really the employee, because he is the one who has to encourage this kind of open discussion, transparency and clarity on what expectations are. So what are the things where clarity is required? You need to have the KRAs clear. Now KRAs by definition should be very measurable, very specific, and therefore it is the job of the manager to ensure that the employee has understood exactly what is expected of him. Now KRAs are there. There has to be some kind of a benchmark. There has to be some kind of a performance standard which the manager wants to take the employee towards. So the performance standard has to be communicated. Like, this is the KRA and this is the kind of benchmark performance I'm expecting from you. Then if a KRA is specified and the time is not given within which he needs to achieve that, then obviously it's not going to be very useful. So therefore there has to be timelines. I expect this particular KRA to be done within so many months, and if you break that KRA into smaller steps, then there has to be subdivisions, and therefore timelines are very important. And the manager has to kind of convey to the employee that he is there, he is offering support. If the employee requires any additional resources or he requires some kind of a process support, then it is available. So the manager, as you can see here, is not specifying and giving deadlines. He is trying to make sure that the employee is able to achieve the KRAs. There is a lot of transparency and clarity. That's the first step for a good performance appraisal process. Next, the equity. There has to be fairness in the entire process. Now, this I have seen many times, that both the manager and the employee know that the KRA is virtually unachievable, but they go ahead with the KRA, and to me that doesn't make any sense. It has to be fair, it has to be transparent. When I say fair, means given the fact that the environment is is known, the assumptions are known, the KRA, that is what is expected, should be fair, achievable, and it should be obviously linked to the strategy of the organization. Now this is where many performance systems fail, because the subsets, that is the KRAs of the junior level employees and the overall organizational strategy they tend to have a mismatch at times. So the KRA should be well thought out and only then communicated. Now, normally it is, there could be 4 or 5 KRAs, but it is nice for the manager to communicate that which are the important deliverables that there's a must, the focus has to be there. Well, when you set a KRA, obviously all the KRAs are important, but there has to be some kind of focus such that the employee knows that, I have to move in this particular direction. And in a good performance appraisal process, the manager has to convince the employee that he is there to give guidance, to coach when necessary, to offer all kinds of both administrative as well as mentoring kind of a support to ensure that the employee achieves the KRAs. We are continuing with what makes a good performance appraisal process. The next is, as in the earlier slide, we had already said that you have to have a ongoing monitoring of performance. Now, when we say ongoing performance monitoring, it is not to check whether things are happening. It is to see whether the manager can facilitate the objectives being achieved. We are not controllers, we are facilitators. The manager has to play a role of a facilitator and see, is there a way he can help the employee achieve the KRAs, and therefore the ongoing performance monitoring is important. And obviously, when monitoring happens, feedback has to be given. Now, multiple source feedback talks about the fact that the employee needs feedback not only from one source, which is the immediate superior, he needs probably feedback from several other systems or subsystems in the organization. It could be colleagues, it could be information, it could be outside people. Only then he'll be able to develop in a much more complete way. I think we are covering this multiple source feedback in some level of detail later on, and we'll probably talk about that then. Now, discussions between the manager and the employee must be open and honest. Therefore, the manager must not come with predetermined issues, and similarly employees must not come with predetermined excuses for non-achievement or for non-compliance. So I think the system has to be open, the system has to be honest. Only then there is a scope for development and improvement. The next point actually builds on the earlier one. Not only should there be an open and honest discussion, there has to be perception of fairness. So, many times the discussion happens well, but when the employee goes back, he goes back with a feeling that somehow it was not a fair discussion. So there has to be a perception of fairness, not only between the manager and subordinate, but between the manager and all other such employees within the department. There cannot be any favorite employee and a not so favorite employee, because that would affect the overall achievement of organizational success. The next point says that in order for a appraisal system to be good, you have to link. We are on the same slide, sir. No, we have to move. We have to link the reward and recognition system with the achievement of KRAs or with the performance. Now, there are many theories which say that some employees do not necessarily relate rewards to performance, but unless there is clarity and unless there is an intention to recognize good performance, it need not always be in a monetary recognition. It could be some kind of a pat on the back, an appreciation letter, membership to some kind of forum. So unless there is a step forward taken by the organizations to say, look guys, you're performing well and I am willing to recognize that, the appraisal process will not really succeed. And one of the problems managers have is they themselves are not quite clear how to give feedback and how to do the appraisal. So in order for the process to be successful, managers themselves must be trained by the HR function or sometimes by outsourced people as to how this appraisal process should be conducted. And maybe a couple of role plays would actually give them the confidence in carrying out this process well. Okay, this is the, I'll request Mr. Amrolia to take forward now.
Yes, I'll just take forward a couple of slides more to give an example. Earlier slide, Sridhar talked of appropriate rewards and recognition. I know one medium-sized organization in the engineering thing where people felt that if we link rewards to performance, it will impact on teamwork. Very relevant viewpoint. So what they decided that everybody will get the same increments and same bonuses irrespective of the performance levels. What actually happened was that over the next 2 years, performance levels fell. People who were earlier working harder, doing better, felt that no, well, what is the use whether I do contribute more or less? I'll get only the same money as my colleagues, or the same increment, or the same performance pay, etc. So levels of performance fell, and then the company went back to the earlier system of differentiating reward based on performance. Of course, one has to keep in mind that you have to balance this, the impact on teamwork of disproportionate rewards and the impact on motivation of no separate rewards. So each company has to work out a balance which would encourage performance and yet make sure that teamwork is not affected too much. One of the ways is that we link certain part of the reward to the departmental performance or corporate performance and some part to the individual performance. There are various ways and means. Now, where do these appraisal systems and processes go wrong? My experience is, firstly, too much quantification gives an illusion of accuracy. I know an aluminum company which had a very detailed appraisal process with points and sub-points for every criteria and every sub-criteria. The intention was that it should make it as quantifiable as possible so that there can be no disputes. Unfortunately, that failed because over-quantification doesn't really help. It can actually give an illusion of accuracy without really measuring what we need to measure. Second is backward emphasis. If you are going to use this more to find faults and what one did not do, the purpose becomes negative and the relationship actually gets strained. The focus has to be on what can the boss and I do together so that my performance improves next year. I think that has to be the focus. While feedback has to be given on the previous year, the focus should be on how to make sure that if there are mistakes or failures, whatever it be, how that is conquered in the coming year. Unclear deliverables. Boss expects something, subordinate thinks the boss expects something else. This is actually far more common than what one thinks, and that's another cause for unhappiness. Lack of consistency across departments. I've experienced there are some managers who are very strict, some who are very lenient, some people give the top rating very easily, some others give top rating very sparingly, creates a lot of heartburn that in one department everybody gets a great rating, another department everybody gets a very average rating. And here I think it is the HR department and the boss's boss who have to play a role in terms of moderating so that everybody is judged, if not on the same yardstick, but on a comparable yardstick. Preconceived notions, sometimes in our mind we have made up our mind that so-and-so is an average performer. So that making up the mind comes first, and based on that we fill up the appraisal form, which again is a wrong way to do. Okay. Feedback saved up for the end of the year. The boss writes down, didn't do this, didn't do that, instead of giving immediate feedback, waits till the end of the year and uses that feedback to justify not a very good rating. It looks to the employee as if he's fault finding. Median rating, that's a very typical, I would say, Indian, maybe an Asian trait. Most of the rating are in the, let's say on a scale of 1 to 5 is normally 3 ratings, 60, 70%. Maybe 30% would be 4 ratings, very few 1 or 2 ratings. We don't like to give direct negative feedback. This has an impact on being unfair to the better performer. Also at times, like I mentioned earlier, VRS has to be done. Employee thinks he's doing a great job and the company suddenly says, sorry, you're not doing a great job. If you look at companies in the West, they give far more direct feedback and such feedback is accepted also far more easily. In India, we are hesitant to give negative feedback. We all are very happy at giving positive feedback. when it comes to negative feedback, somebody is not doing well, we sort of couch it in very polite terms, and in the process are not fair to the individual, because he thinks he is doing a good job while you feel he is not doing a good job, and unless you give him that feedback directly, he will not improve. Excessive linkage to rewards, etc. I mentioned earlier. Some of the areas which one has to factor in. Okay. Now we'll talk about what some companies do, which I will leave it to Sridhar.
One of the things companies do is they force you to rate some people as below average and some people as above average. It's called normalizing. So, I'm actually strong on quantification, so maybe I'm not the best person to talk about this. But there are some limitations of forced choice. But companies do that, especially companies where a particular function has got large number of employees, and therefore they say, look, so many percentage of the employees must be below the norm and so many must be above the norm, which actually makes the manager really think and therefore be fair on the assessment. Second thing companies do is, as I told earlier, multiple source feedback. That is, they actually try to get assessment about the employee's performance not only from top down but also from the for the entire circle, 360, from peers, from subordinates, from outside people. And again, as I told you earlier, we'll discuss a little more about 360-degree assessment. And the third thing companies do, they try to give low performers, rotate their jobs such that they get noticed a little more, they get opportunities to perform more, put the high performers in the area where the performance was not all that great so that the performance improves overall. So this kind of rotation is done. There are some, this has to be done a little carefully, because sometimes when you rotate, the high performance areas can also become low. The low performance areas do not improve. So you have to be a little careful how you do that. But it's something that companies do use as a tool. Of course, continuous training and on the appraisal and feedback is something that should prevent many of the problems discussed above. Open and recorded. Open as in there has to be openness, there has to be acceptance on both parties. Recorded and maybe with a sign off, so that tomorrow there is no feeling of bias, or there is no feeling that people have not been fair. And as Mr. Amroli just said, you could have rewards could be split into two components. One could be for the entire team or entire group or department, whatever it is, and that's applicable for everybody in the team. The next component is for those people who kind of perform a little better than the others, and therefore some differentiation in the rewards consisting of individual as well as group. Now, we talked a lot about KRAs, so we thought probably some time spent here would be good. KRAs, as I told you earlier, stand for key result areas, and in order to do a good KRA based system, you have to define clearly and properly what are the expectations of performance from the employee. So well defined and clear KRAs become drivers of performance. Then obviously when you do the KRA for any employee, you have to ensure that a particular employee's KRAs are aligned with the organizational as well as the divisional goals. So which means if you take the process, first you have to understand what the organization goals are for the particular period, then how does this particular division achieve the organization goals, and therefore how does an employee within a division achieve this particular goal. That's how you do it. Then you have as I said earlier, you don't have too many KRAs, otherwise the employee would lose focus. Normally it's good to restrict it to 4. There may be sometimes organizations have 5, but 4 is a nice number to restrict the KRAs to. So why do we need to set KRAs? Because well set KRAs provide a clear path for process for results to be measured objectively. So if I set the KRAs well, the appraisal and the assessment becomes easy. So there is no dispute or bad feeling towards the end. Second is that it provides direction. So now the employee knows that this is what is expected of me, and this is the direction I must move in. Third is it provides clarity on what are the expected results. And I think we all agree that once we know what we have to do, the chances are we'll do it much better. Obviously, it increases connectivity with the organization, because the employee now feels that he is doing something to achieve the organization's overall goals, and therefore he feels proud that he is directly contributing to one of the goals of the organization. So it increases the connectivity. It allows employees to be proactive and enable them to plan and execute. As I told you, the KRA setting process is done jointly between the manager and the employee, superior and subordinate, and therefore well set KRAs allow the employees to be proactive and share their views, and therefore enable them in the planning and execution function. And it instills a sense of ownership. Once a KRA is given to an employee, employees can then plan on their own, and they develop a sense of ownership that yes, this particular goal or KRA, it belongs to me, and I'll make sure that I will take care of it. Now, we all have been familiar with the SMART, and it applies to many things, including the KRAs. It must be specific, it must be measurable, it must be achievable. This is where the fairness or the parity part comes in. It has to be relevant to the organizational goals and the divisional goals, and there has to be a time within which these KRAs should be achieved, therefore time bound. These 5 things: SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So I actually have an example of a KRA for a marketing manager, and in the Q&A, if you would like us to answer specific questions on KRAs for different functions, you could please ask. Let's say one of the KRAs could be that the market share increases from 10% to 15%. You can see here now, it is specific. It says you are at 10%, I want you to go to 15%. It's measurable because it's market share, and we all know that market share can be measured. It is achievable because we're not asking you to go from 10% to 40% or 50%. It's an incremental, achievable incremental goal, and this market share increase has to happen within 1 year. So it's time bound. So this is how you set KRAs. The next example is, let's say if a company has got several products, and if it is either introducing a new product or it's entering into a new region, you could get that the market share in that particular region or for that particular product could probably increase by another 20%. So again, as you can see, it is SMART has been respected here. Inventory of finished goods has to be maintained as a 15 days of average sales. That means you must make sure that whatever is produced is kind of rotated quickly and sold. And the receivables, after all, you sell on credit sometimes, and therefore you have to make sure that your receivables also are maintained at an average of 30 days, or for people who have got a credit policy, well within the credit policy of the organization. This is only one example which tells you that KRAs can be set in a way that helps you achieve performance and helps achieve organizational goals. So KRAs should be aligned both vertically and horizontally.
Okay, if there are the boss's KRA, actually look at it this way: the company's goals for the year have to evolve down to the next level and next level, ultimately to the individual's KRA. So to that extent, they have to be aligned vertically. Similarly, they have to be aligned horizontally, in the sense that the goals for the finance department and the marketing department cannot be at a variance, okay? Or for HR department and another department cannot be variance. All have to move towards the same corporate goal. Okay? We are running out of time, but if there are any issues, I can give you some examples of how goals have to be linked both horizontally and vertically. The criteria for measuring progress for each KRA should be clearly understood, so that both the appraiser and the appraisee are clear on that. Quarterly or 6-monthly review must be conducted to provide opportunity to correct. If one waits till the end of the year, then the employee gets no opportunity to correct if there are some areas where he needs to do something different. The goal should be achievable but ambitious. If they are totally unachievable, it will demotivate people. If they are not ambitious enough, again, it's not really worthwhile. So goals must be something which can be achieved by an element of stress. How much the stretch has to be given. I think it's a function of the boss and the employee's capability and the organization culture. I don't really want to go into the next slide, which is steps in KRA goal setting. I think it's more or less, you can read it from the slide itself. But essentially, I would focus on the last item, that the KRA should ideally be jointly arrived at between the boss and the subordinate. Performance standards, what is the expected level, what would constitute a good performance or an acceptable performance or unacceptable performance. I think there has to be clarity on that. I think that's very important. Related employees, KRAs have to be aligned. You cannot have disaligned the KRAs, otherwise there would be confusion in the organization. Periodic review, feedback, support again is important, so that the employee gets a chance to improve on his performance. Let me talk of the last couple of issues. One is the appraisal interview. By bitter experience, I find that one of the most difficult things is to give an appraisal interview, particularly where an appraisee has not done well. Okay, the appraisee will come up with 50 reasons why he has not done well. He'll be defensive. Best thing is not to attack the person's defenses, just to listen to him, point out factual things. Don't talk about the individual. If necessary, postpone the action, tell him to reflect and come back a week later. And also recognize that maybe it is possible that you are not right. Sometimes there could be merit in what the employee is saying. How to give negative feedback. Do not criticize the person, just talk about the performance. You know, the moment we start criticizing the individual, he will react even more negatively. Just talk of the performance as if it is something separate from the individual. If you have to criticize, please do so privately, not in front of 5 people. Negative criticism would be accepted if it is not done publicly. I see sometimes managers making loud talk in the corridor. Oh, Sridhar, you are not done well. What it is expected much better of you in front of 5 people. I think that's the surest way to make sure that Sridhar gets totally demotivated. Okay. Then avoid this. Once in a year, you list out all the negative points, and end of the year, use the opportunity to, fire him and say, oh, this is what you've done wrong, that is what you've done wrong, etc. And never say that you're always wrong. Say, well, in this you could be mistaken. There are ways of putting across a point which is less hurtful and more acceptable to the individual. How do you make sure that the interview leads to improved performance? Because the objective of the interview is to make sure the performance next year is at a high level. Firstly, don't make the subordinate feel threatened. Only in exceptional cases, if you have to say, then you have to say that, okay, this is the last chance, no other chance. If you don't perform well in the next 6 months, or if you don't improve performance, well, we'll have to rethink your continuance in the company. That you do only as a last resort, not as a normal this thing. Okay. After stating a viewpoint, please keep your mouth closed, listen to the subordinate, give him a chance to explain. You may or may not buy the explanation, but give him the freedom and the satisfaction of having said his piece. And very often you'll find that some elements in what he says could be correct. Make sure the interview is conducted by a person who is generally seen as helpful and supportive of employees. If the boss is not perceived as that, let the boss also sit in at the interview, or the HR head sit in at the interview, so that the employee gets a comfort level that what is being said represents the company's views and is not the bias of an individual. And finally, end it with giving the employee the necessary support for his development and change. It should be seen as a proactive facet, which objective being that, okay, this year I may have made some mistakes, I may have stumbled. My boss and I will work together to see how I do better next year. Just want to touch little on this 360-degree appraisal because very often we are asked questions on this.
Yes. So 360-degree appraisal is basically a very comprehensive feedback on the employee. So it has four blocks or components. One is the employee has to appraise himself. It's called the self-appraisal. So since it's a self-appraisal, obviously it applies to those employees who are able to assess their performance objectively. Then the next component is the superior's appraisal. This is the both the direct superior and indirect. Indirect means people who are at a level higher than the employee, but with who they have interaction. And then you have the subordinates appraisal. If that employee has 2 or 3 people reporting into him, their feedback about the performance, their appraisal. And then you have the peer appraisal. Peers are people in the same organizational hierarchy as this person. It could be teammates from other functions. It could be internal customers. It could be external members like suppliers, like dealers or customers. So this is called 360 degrees. I think it's a circle, and therefore the entire view of the employee is taken into account. So what could be the advantages of this? Obviously the first advantage is very comprehensive. Second is it tells the employee, every human being has certain blind spots because we do not know. So this kind of a feedback, it actually tells us, makes us aware of our own blind spots, and therefore gives us an opportunity to really improve and become a better professional. It is a very useful supplement to the traditional appraisal. When the disadvantages come, you'll understand why we are saying it's a useful supplement. Then it's an opportunity for subordinates, for colleagues to kind of share their views about the particular employee who's being appraised. It actually should improve teamwork, and we have said can because unless the 360 process is handled well, it won't. So it can improve the teamwork. It definitely improves customer focus and service because once you know that the feedback is taken from the outside people also, you tend to be a little more service oriented and focus oriented than you would have been otherwise. And it's obviously a useful input for planning the career of the employee, planning his development, which are the areas where he needs to be given some additional inputs. When you do the 360 process, or when you're thinking about the 360-degree process, these are the factors that you must consider. You must first know very clearly why are you doing this 360-degree process. Mind you, it's not easy to do a 360-degree feedback, and therefore if the purpose of doing that is not very clear, then it will be a self-defeating. Second is you must take into account what is the kind of culture that's prevailing in your organization. Now, if you are not having a transparent, open kind of an organization, the 360-degree will actually make the employees go into a shell instead of actually coming down and coming out and doing better. It has to be top down. For example, you cannot tell that your subordinate will be undergoing 360-degree appraisal and you will not. So your employee who you're asking him to go through a 360 degrees, you should also go through a 360 degrees, give him opportunity to give feedback on your performance, and therefore it has to be top down. And it has to start from very senior levels also. So it could actually apply from quite senior levels till the executive level. When you do a 360 degrees, you must talk to the person and explain to him what is really happening, because he shouldn't suddenly get all kinds of information about him and feel that he's being threatened or he's being targeted. So there has to be a proper explanation done. Why are you doing 360 degrees? What is the objective? How will it help him or her become better professional? And then you do it. You have to ensure that whatever information is shared is maintained confidentially, and the employee should not know who is giving that. There has to be anonymity, because otherwise he may tend to behave a little differently with that particular customer or with that particular supplier, and that's not good for the organization. It is only a supplement to a regular appraisal. You can't do 360-degree feedback throughout the year. So it is only a supplement to the regular appraisal, which is obviously important. And again, here again, you have to give training to the employees or to the people who have undergone the process on how to understand this feedback and how to take it forward. So this is again a consideration, and it's very time consuming. So if you do not have that kind of energy in the organization, then probably doing a 360 degrees would not be very effective. The process is as follows. You first identify who among the peers, subordinates, superiors, outside people and all are the relevant raters. When you say relevant, it means the ones who interact more frequently amongst the ones who are more well equipped to give this kind of feedback constructively. Then you have to know that there has to be a number of raters. If you have too many data items, then you will not really know what to do. So it should be an optimum number of raters. There has to be a very simple and constructive questionnaire prepared such that it doesn't take too much time to complete. It shouldn't be very complicated. Maybe 15-20 minutes or at the most half an hour should be the time taken for a normal person to complete the questionnaire. Then you must have a means of analyzing this data. Now, some of this feedback may be in numbers, therefore you can do a quantitative analysis. Some of them could be in ranks or in qualitative measures, so you have to have a rank analysis and a qualitative analysis, but it has to be analyzed. Then it is summarized in the form of a feedback report, which is discussed with the employee to give him a comprehensive knowledge about himself. And normally when you do a 360-degree process, you need to have trained facilitators who can actually carry this process very effectively. And the last point is, after all this, you have to list out very clearly what are the action points for development, because most organizations cannot afford a 360-degree every year. Therefore, if it doesn't result in a development action plan, then I would say the entire 360-degree would have been a wasted effort.
Just one caution. Companies sometimes come to me and ask me, we want to do 360, what should we do, how should we do? I just give them 2 or 3 useful inputs. One is that at least for the first couple of years, use the 360 only for developmental action. Make people feel at ease about getting feedback from their peers and their subordinates. They are used to getting feedback from the bosses is okay, but make them feel less threatened. So use it only for developmental action. Keep the results confidential, that only the HR or if there's an outside person who is facilitating, let him only know the feedback on each individual, so that there is a great comfort level. Once the process is accepted, after we do it 2-3 times, then you can use it in terms of one of the inputs for evaluation also. There's something to be kept in mind. This is the last slide. Just giving you what is called a 3x3 potential performance matrix, which is used by some companies for deciding on career planning and who are going to be the fast track performers. There are people who performance is very great, but who are near the end of their ability to grow further. They are high performers, need to be given good rewards, but need not be promoted very fast. Promotion has to be phased out slowly. There are people with high potential but low performance. I think one has to look at what is it that will motivate him. If he has the potential, why is he not performing better? Maybe a change of job, maybe a change of boss, maybe there's something else affecting him. So because you are wasting the potential of the individual, that's something which companies need to look at. There are people with high potential and high performance. They are the ones who would be really a fast track people who would who are to be nurtured carefully and to be retained by the company. And there are people, low performers, low potential, whom if it comes to it, you have to give them feedback and if necessary, say bye-bye to them, because companies cannot afford to keep too many people in this category. But that's all as far as the presentation is concerned. If you have any queries or anything, please feel free to type in the questions.